Her fingers were red in places. They looked like burns that were just now healing. Sotai said, "I feel so sorry for you." She continued, "Your mommy died when you were still a baby. You were used as a political tool practically since you could walk. You were rejected by your family and mocked by your own ladies in waiting." Yes, that was Li Shu's story. Truly it was a shame. "No one understands you. Do you suppose you are always the victim?" The gentle voice and the aroma enveloped Li Shu. She could feel the body heat from the pale skin. It had been a long time since she had last felt another person so close to her. She felt like she might simply melt away. "They are all terrible to you. You are nothing but sweet and kind, and all they do is bully you and make your life a living nightmare." Li Shu, nearly melting into the sweet odor, nodded at Sotai's words. Yes, that is right. They were always bullying her, ignoring her and using her. What had Li Shu ever done wrong? For a long time now a half-formed question drifted through Li Shu's hazy mind. When she wondered had she told Sotai about her father, "They all leave you alone to eat cold food by yourself in a gloomy room." It was unbelievable. When had she mentioned the food being cold? The question came to her, but she couldn't quite make her brain work. She felt Sotai's embrace become less tight, and she managed to turn around. She finally faced someone she had only known as a voice until this moment. "What? Why are you looking at me like that? Is there something on my face?" The smiling girl before Li Shu was a color she had never seen before. She was beautiful in her way. Her figure was peach-like and her lips were full and red like cherries. Her skin seemed colorless. People from the West had pale skin, but this was much paler than that. Li Shu could never have made her skin this white, no matter how much white makeup powder she used. Sotai's hair was also like an old woman's hair. It was her hair that Li Shu had mistaken for a tassel. The hair ran straight and true down her back. "Do I look strange to you?" Sotai asked. Her eyebrows were slowly furrowing and they were white too. Her eyes were as red as rubies. On the way to the western capital, Li Shu had heard the rumors. People said a woman like one of the mythical immortals was stirring up trouble in every region. She was making the powerful people of the capital dance in the palm of her hand. "It's you." "The White Lady, so you know about me. That makes us two of a kind then." Sotai twirled Li Shu's hair around the end of her finger. "Because I know about you too. I just never thought we would find ourselves in the same place together." She smiled and then tugged on Li Shu's hair. "This black hair, I'm jealous of it." Li Shu could not speak. "And your healthy skin, you can go out in the sun and it does not get inflamed and burn." Still, Li Shu was silent. "I can't even stand the light from a window." "You complained about the gloom, Li Shu." "The darkness, those gloomy corners are the only places where I can survive." Sotai's eyes were narrow as she stared fixedly at Li Shu. "I have something to tell you. All the torment that has been inflicted upon you, you cannot blame anyone for it. It is your own fault." Slim fingers danced across Li Shu's cheek and rough fingertips scratched her skin. "You never had to starve growing up and you put on all their pretty clothes without question. But you just sit around doing nothing, do you not, Li Shu? You should know that if you cannot protect yourself you will be a target." Now fingers pinched at her cheek, digging into her skin. The nails left scratches behind. "It sickens me to look at you." A tremendous frown came over Sotai's face, a look of contempt every bit as brutal as her words. Li Shu shrank into herself. "It's disgusting just seeing you there." Sotai's chilly stare made Li Shu's heart skip a beat. It reminded her of so many stares she had seen before. Her father's stare, her half-sister's stare, her lady's stares. Li Shu's teeth started to chatter. She felt like she might be sucked into those red eyes. Overhead she heard scurrying sounds like bugs moving about. It sounded to her like the voices of the maids and servants, spreading tales about her and condemning her behind her back. "No, stop." Li Shu shook her head and pressed a hand to her cheek. Red scratch marks must have been on it. She looked at Sotai with fear in her eyes. Sotai's lips twisted. "Sickening, it is like looking at my old self." Li Shu had no hope anymore of understanding what Sotai was talking about. She began to run, desperate to get out of there. She dashed through the decaying hallway and ran up the stairs. As Sotai had told her, the door to the next floor was not locked. Li Shu kept running, going higher and higher. She lost count of how many floors she had climbed. The hem of her robe was filthy. The creaking of the floorboards had become deafening. She saw a door that was different from the others. The door had a lock, but the lock was rotting. Li Shu grabbed the handle. The door was somewhat heavy and she opened it. She found herself looking at a leaden sky. The rulers of the past had likely looked out over the entire capital from this vantage point, a cup of wine in hand. They probably believed their glory would last forever. It was a balcony, although it had been ravaged by exposure to the elements. Li Shu took an experimental step. The wood groaned weakly underfoot. Normally she would have been frozen by fear, but now she walked forward one unsteady step at a time. The railing was equally dilapidated. All the paint had flaked off of it. The wind was blowing, whipping over her cheeks and sending her hair everywhere. Li Shu could see birds flying. They looked so free. She reached out toward them, but she could not reach them, of course. She looked at her hand, grasping uselessly at the sky. Chapter 16. Basin and Li Shu. When Maomao and Jinshi got word, they rushed to the tower by horse. There wasn't time to arrange a carriage. Instead, they took the horse the messenger had ridden, with Jinshi holding the reins. Maomao didn't ask if she could ride up behind him. He simply said, "We will be going fast. Don't fall off." She took that as permission. She pressed her face into his back, which smelled of perfume, and braced herself, trying to remain upright. When they arrived at the palace, Jinshi removed his mask. He seemed begrudging even of the time it took to show his insignia of office. The horse did not even slow down as they headed for the tower where Consort Li Shu was confined. A crowd had already gathered in front of the pagoda. The crowd included guards, gawking bureaucrats, and court ladies. Soldiers were insisting that they stay back. The court ladies blushed furiously as soon as they noticed Jinshi. Then they spotted Maomao and looked incensed instead. Maomao and Jinshi both ignored them. There was no time to pander to them. They could see a woman on the uppermost story of the pagoda. She was a young woman gazing into the distance, and her hair was disheveled. It was Consort Li Shu. Maomao couldn't tell what she was doing. She seemed to be trying to grab hold of something, reaching out with one hand toward the sky. What is she doing up there? Maomao thought. The building was very old and creaked under your feet. She couldn't believe the timid consort had gone all the way to the top floor on her own. She was too far away to see her expression or guess what she was trying to do. "Let me through, let me through," cried a familiar voice. Maomao realized the woman restrained by the guards was Li Shu's chief lady-in-waiting. She stretched out her arms as far as she could, as if she might reach the door of the tower, but the guards would not let her. Lady Li Shu, the woman's clothes were covered in mud. It was strange. The mud didn't look like it had gotten there when the guards stopped her. It almost looked like someone had thrown a mud pie at her. But the chief lady-in-waiting wasn't the only familiar face. What is going on? What is Consort Li Shu doing all the way up there? Basin rushed up out of breath. He must have heard the news as well. Perhaps he was exercising when it reached him, because he was dressed in a martial arts training uniform instead of his usual official attire. The addition of a shouting young man to the panicked lady-in-waiting only increased the general confusion. Now the guards had to deal with Basin, who was determined to get into the pagoda. They tried to push him back, but they ended up being dragged along instead. His infamous strength. Maomao had learned about it firsthand in the western capital, but she sensed something more than simple physical power was at work here. She couldn't think about it now. They needed to figure out what to do about Consort Li Shu. "Calm down," a clear, beautiful voice rang out. Basin and the chief lady-in-waiting both stopped and looked at the owner of the voice, Jinshi. He passed his horse's reins to one of the soldiers, then strode over to the two of them. "I will go," but the lady-in-waiting stuttered. "I said I'll do it." Jinshi's expression allowed no argument. The lady-in-waiting sank to the ground. A red line marked her face and grains of rice were in her hair. Was somebody harassing her? Maomao wondered. It was not impossible. You did not have to be in the rear palace to find plenty of unpleasant people. With word going around that her lady was under arrest on suspicions of infidelity, it would hardly be surprising if the chief lady-in-waiting suffered some reprisals as well. As far as Maomao could tell, this woman was the only lady to accompany Li Shu. She must have been tending to the consort all this time, all by herself with no one to help her. At first Maomao had thought of her as simply a particularly unpleasant food taster. She was struck by how much people could change. "Why did you leave the consort alone?" Jinchi asked. "Were you going to taste her meal?" There was no kindness in his voice, but his tone was not cold either. His even demeanor seemed to help the lady-in-waiting regain control of herself. She said, "My lady has been very depressed lately. She seems weak, perhaps because she cannot leave her chambers and has no way of getting fresh air. I think today she reached her limit. She sent me from her room. She does not appear to trust anyone. So you left until she regained control of herself?" "Yes, sir. I needed to change anyway. It seems I will need to do it again." She looked at her filthy skirt. Jinchi nodded and headed toward the door. Basin said, "I'm coming with you," and started to go after him. The other man looked at him. "There is no need for you to come. It is not your job." Basin scowled, clenching his fists. He is not wrong, Maomao thought. Unlike Jinchi, who was personally acquainted with consort Lishu from working in the rear palace, Basin had merely accompanied her on their trip west. Whatever feelings he might have for her, dealing with her was not his business. But he started, a pained look on his face. "You are my adjutant. You understand what that means?" "Yes." Basin didn't say anything. "Consider the worst-case scenario and prepare for it. You are the only one who can." With that, Jinchi disappeared into the tower. He really trusts this guy. She didn't know whether Jinchi was making the best choice or not, but she knew it was a difficult decision. She also saw that she needed to do what she could to help. Basin looked deeply pensive for a moment, then called one of the officials over and began giving instructions. She believed he mentioned gathering every blanket and mattress possible. However, Lishu was too far up for that to be helpful. Meanwhile, Maomao did what only Maomao could do. "Did consort Lishu show any other unusual behavior?" she asked, rubbing the lady-in-waiting's back. Maomao had observed the scratch on the woman's cheek. She wondered if Lishu had had some kind of fit. Lishu was usually so docile. However, if she was feeling that paranoid, it wouldn't have been surprising. Maomao said, "I don't know if I would say unusual, but she has seemed especially interested in the ceiling lately. I believe she was troubled by a hole in the woodwork. Was something on the floor above bothering her? Would that explain why she went up to the top story? I think there was someone on the level above us. There was a strange smell in our room sometimes, and I think it came from up there." "A strange smell?" "Yes, it was like perfume, but it was nothing I had ever smelled before. I did not like it very much, but it seemed to please the consort. She spent a lot of time sitting where she could be most easily seen." Maomao tilted her head and this time turned to one of the guards. She asked, "Was anyone else in that tower?" The guards looked at each other, appearing distressed. Their faces showed they knew something but couldn't quite say what it was. "Was there anyone else?" Maomao demanded. The answer came from an unexpected source. Not was, is. A man with spectacles, an abacus and tousled hair came trotting up to join the conversation. "I requested that if anyone else were put in that tower, they be kept as far away from them as possible." It was Lahan, and his words carried a slight rebuke for the guards. "Apologies, sir. The tower is old. The upper floors did not seem to be in a usable state. Well, I did not think anyone else would end up in there anyway." "Certainly not a consort. What are you talking about?" Maomao said. "Only what I asked to be done lest it become a diplomatic incident, you see." "Diplomatic incident?" Maomao didn't see at all. What did that have to do with anything? "I told you you should have come to my meeting with that Western beauty. She asked me for this." "This Western beauty of yours, you mean the special envoy?" "Keep your voice down," Lahan said, slapping a hand over Maomao's mouth. The guards did not appear to have heard, but Lishu's chief lady-in-waiting reacted. "The special envoy, yes, that reminds me. What is it?" Maomao asked. "You asked me if anything unusual had happened with Lady Lishu, and I just remembered, yes." "What?" Maomao grabbed the woman by the shoulders, almost shaking her. One of the ladies-in-waiting released a bird. "We received a white bird from the envoy." "A bird? What happened to the mirror?" Maomao had thought the envoys gifted large mirrors to each of the high consorts. Had Lishu not gotten one? "We did receive a mirror, but consort Lishu was also given a pair of mating birds. This was because she was the youngest. The envoys thought perhaps she might be lonely, so far from her parents, and they thought birds would help." "I suppose so." but Lady Lishu starts sneezing anytime she touches an animal's fur or feathers, so she did not see much of them. She felt bad about not being able to care for them properly, and she gave them to one of the maids. A little while ago, while Lady Lishu was away, the maid let the bird go. In fact, she seemed to have let both of them go, I'm afraid. The birds. She let them go. Maomao felt like the pieces were just about to fall into place. She searched her memory desperately, trying to figure out why this seemed so important. Could it be these birds didn't happen to be pigeons, did they? They might have been. I never actually saw them, so I am not sure, but I did hear them cooing, I think. Pigeons knew how to get back to their homes. The page Lishu had copied from the novel was rolled up like a string. What if it had been tied to a pigeon's leg? There was something else as well. At the banquet for the envoys last summer, wasn't there somebody talking to you? It wasn't one of the envoys themselves, but one of their servants. Now that you mention it, among the ladies in waiting, there had been someone saying something like this: the gentlemen of the West are generous and so very handsome. I can't believe I missed it, Maomao thought. She was very sure the book had been sold by the visiting caravan. It made sense someone from the West would have been able to get the translation sooner than those in the capital. However, the envoys had come to the banquet specifically to market themselves to the emperor and his younger brother. They would certainly question the palace women first, seeking any information they could find. They would naturally focus on the person who appeared most vulnerable. If their reconnaissance had revealed Lishu as the easiest consort to manipulate, that explained why she was their target. They deceived us. She should have understood, especially after discovering one of the envoys was connected to the Shi clan and had seemed completely innocent. However, now was not the time for regret. "All right, Lahan, who is in that tower?" In response, Lahan leaned toward Maomao and whispered a name. When she heard it, she immediately broke out in a clammy sweat. The White Immortal. Of all the people it could have been, that made Maomao all the more curious about the strange smell that had been drifting into the consort's chambers. The White Lady knew a lot about drugs. It was possible she had mixed something into the incense to dull Lishu's judgment. Maomao shoved past Lahan and headed for the tower. She did not see Basin. He must have taken Jinchi's warning to prepare for the worst to heart. However, she did not have time to worry about him now. She needed to go see exactly what was happening with Consort Lishu. She slipped past the startled guards and into the tower. She walked through a hallway, then climbed some stairs, then another hallway and more stairs. It was enough to make her head spin. She knew she had reached the top floor when she found several men there. Jinchi was standing in front of an open door. Beyond the door was a balcony. Lishu stood on the balcony, her eyes unfocused. Jinchi was speaking to her calmly. The balcony was falling apart. Lishu was light enough that it could support her, but if Jinchi tried to go out there, his foot might go clean through the floor. He obviously hoped he could talk her back into the building, but it didn't look like it was going very well. "Don't move." "Stay away," Lishu was saying. What was she looking at? She gave little shakes of her head and her face was contorted with fear. A beautiful, much-beloved gentleman was standing before her, yet she looked as agonized as if she beheld a monster. Her eyes did not see his beauty. She was seeing something else, something fantastic. "Consort," Jinchi said gently, still trying not to upset her further. He had the right idea. If he could just keep talking to her until she came back to her senses, he might yet succeed. Maomao stood quietly behind Jinchi. It would be risky for the young man to go out on the balcony. If they wanted to get any closer to Lishu, Maomao would be the better choice. "I'll go," she said. "Hey, wait," Jinchi said, but she brushed his hand away. She really didn't want to do this. What if her foot punched a hole through the floor? What was the consort even doing way up here? That was only one of many bitter questions that occurred to Maomao. But like an idiot, she pressed ahead, consequences be damned. She had boarded this boat, and she intended to ride it until the end. One thought grew irresistibly in her mind. Now that she had come this far, she was going to help Consort Lishu. "Consort," she said, "Lady Arduo is waiting for you." It was a judicious choice. Mentioning her family here and now would almost certainly have had the opposite of the desired effect. Even Jinchi's presence hadn't brought Lishu back to them. Instead, Maomao mentioned the name of the person the consort trusted most right now. Her choice made the consort twitch. Lady Arduo. She did not seem afraid of that name. Yes, she will be here soon. You need to change before she arrives. Maomao was careful not to tell Li Shu to come back to them specifically. She only needed the consort to move closer to her on the balcony. She just had to stay calm and move, but it was never that simple. A sweet and bitter aroma drifted to Maomao's nose. Something passed by her without a sound of footsteps. It seemed so much a part of the natural world that no one reacted at first. The white lady passed them by as unnoticed as a breeze. Jinchi was the first to register her presence. He moved to intercept her, but then a shrill, piercing laugh erupted. Gah ha 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 ha. That was all she did. She simply laughed.